The Minish Cap is a 2D Zelda game on the Game Boy Advance, released in 2004. While it does feature some twists like the shrinking mechanic, it still contains plenty of the exploration, dungeon crawling and puzzles that you'd expect from a Zelda game. Let's get right into the Evolution of Zelda, the Minish Cap. Like the Oracle games, Minish Cap was developed by Capcom. The director Hidemaro Fujibayashi later went on to direct Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Minish Cap was released at the end of the GBA's life. It released so late that in North America the DS was already out. I couldn't find much info about the development. It seems like this game had a smooth development cycle without any major troubles. Minish Cap is a tight game that feels well polished. The main gimmick of Minish Cap is the shrinking mechanic. At certain spots, Link can shrink himself down. He gets tiny, being represented by only 3 pixels on the screen. While you're in this small form, interaction with the world is severely limited. You can't do much outside of walking around. The overworld is full of small passageways and other spots that you need to shrink down to access. Once you enter one of these areas, the camera zooms in to make Link appear normal sized. When you're in these smaller areas, Link is able to interact with the world and use items as normal. This shrinking mechanic is used in a variety of ways. It's mostly used for exploration, both finding secrets and traversing otherwise impassable areas. It also gets a decent amount of use in both puzzles and boss fights. The shrinking mechanic is well explored and developed. It adds a twist to the game without being intrusive. This game also has a cloning mechanic. At certain spots, Link can charge his sword to create clones of himself. When this mechanic is first introduced, you're only able to make 1 clone, but by the end of the game you're able to make 3. These clones are used to push large objects or to activate multiple switches simultaneously. The difficulty in the cloning puzzles comes from ensuring your clones survive. If you or your clones take damage, they all disappear. In addition, your clones are not solid and can pass through walls. If this happens, your clones disappear. This can be a bit fiddly and frustrating at times. I'd have preferred if your clones couldn't pass through walls, but this would make the puzzles easier. The cloning puzzles test skill more than logic. You'll usually know what you need to do, and the difficulty is getting your clones there successfully. It's a decent mechanic that's a change of pace from the more traditional puzzles. The cloning mechanic doesn't interact with the world in any meaningful way. It's mostly used in puzzles and boss fights. The overworld of Minish Cap reminds me of Majora's Mask. There's a central town that's full of content. Not only are there plenty of NPCs with their own side quests, there's also a host of secrets accessible by shrinking. The town is directly in the middle of the map, with the areas leading to dungeons out on the edges. It's a layout that works well and allows the town to act as a hub. Like previous 2D Zelda games, you unlock the ability to fast travel to specific points. The map feels particularly small this time around. This is compounded on by the lack of an alternate world. Whether it's Subrosia, the Dark World, or the past, it's common for Zelda games to feature a secondary overworld, but there's nothing like that here. Despite being small, the map manages to fit in a couple of familiar locations like Lake Hylia and Lon Lon Ranch. The map may not be big, but it is dense. It's littered with secrets and blocked off paths, which can be opened over time through Kinstone Fusion. Kinstones are a brand new collectible. You'll find them around the world, in chests, as random drops, almost everywhere. When you approach certain NPCs, an icon will appear indicating you can press L to start Kinstone Fusion. This brings up an interface which shows their Kinstone piece and all of your Kinstones. If you have a matching one, you can use it to fuse. When you fuse a Kinstone, a short cutscene shows a change happening in the world. This can be a new path opening up, a cave appearing, a new NPC, a unique event, or some other change. You never quite know what's going to happen when you fuse Kinstones. This mechanic gives you a real incentive to go back and revisit areas of the world. The huge variety of possible events keeps it feeling fresh and exciting. There are 100 Kinstone fusions to complete. It feels like most NPCs have a Kinstone fusion. There's a massive amount of content here. You're given plenty of opportunities to interact with this mechanic, even if you don't go out of your way. That said, I could see it getting repetitive if you tried to complete every fusion. It's a great system to interact with throughout the game, but I wouldn't try to go for 100% completion. The other new collectible are the shells. These don't have anything in common with the seashells from Link's Awakening. The shells are found all throughout the world. They're used to buy figurines. The process of buying figurines is excruciatingly slow. It requires navigating several unskippable text boxes, and there's a chance of getting a duplicate of one you've already gotten. If you went for all 136 figurines, you'd be spending hours just waiting for the dialogue and animations to play out. There's no reward for individual figurines, only for completing the collection. This mechanic might as well not exist. You'd have to be a masochist to try to get every figurine. It's extremely tedious. Minish Cap features a great collection of both new and existing items. The items provide both utility and interesting puzzles. The Gust Jar allows you to suck in enemies and blow a gust of wind. Both parts of this functionality are used well. For example, in puzzles where you need to use the blowing function to propel a leaf through water, or in combat where you must suck a shield off an enemy to damage it. It's the new item which is utilised the most. There's also the Cane, the Molmitz, and the Flame Lantern. In terms of returning items, I'm happy to see the Rock Cape. It continues to provide a huge boost in mobility. My only complaint is it comes late in the game, and you're pretty much finished exploring the overworld by that point. While not specifically an item, Link can also jump into whirlwinds and use the Minish Cap to glide. This adds some extra verticality, with some sections only reachable through gliding. Link's items and abilities complement each other well and provide an interesting toolset for puzzles. There weren't any items I felt weren't used enough, and also no items I felt were overused. The puzzles are one of the standout areas of the Minish Cap. They do an excellent job of blending new and old ideas. I'm always impressed that these games keep coming up with new mechanics that feel right at home. No idea is introduced and simply thrown out. There isn't a single puzzle mechanic in this game that feels underexplored. The game strikes a good balance between reusing puzzles with added complexity and introducing new ones. Link's combat options have been greatly expanded. Rolling allows you to dodge and reposition with ease. Throughout the game, you'll get Tiger Scrolls which unlock new moves. These vary in usefulness. The Great Spin is a powerful late game reward that trivialises large combat encounters. In contrast, the Down Thrust feels useless. One of these Tiger Scrolls allows you to fire a beam when at full health, which is a nice reference to a recurring series mechanic. The combat in this game plays out similarly to the other 2D Zelda games. It doesn't push the difficulty as much as A Link to the Past or Seasons, but there is still some challenge. Most of the items don't have much use in combat. The most useful combat item is the Boomerang, which can stun almost anything, including some mini-bosses. The Boomerang can stun lock enemies, making many encounters a breeze. I don't think the combat stands out quite as well as the puzzles, but it is enjoyable nonetheless. Minish Cap may only have 6 dungeons, but they're all great. Every dungeon is well designed, with unique mechanics and strong theming. The Palace of the Winds is one of the best themes for a 2D dungeon so far in the series. While there aren't many dungeons, each one is memorable. No 2 dungeons feel the same, and there weren't any bad ones. Where most 2D games lean towards either combat or puzzle-focused dungeons, Minish Cap strikes a balance. Dungeons aren't challenging gauntlets like in A Link to the Past or Zelda 1, but there is a higher risk of dying than in Link's Awakening or Ages. If you stock up on fairies or potions, you're unlikely to die. Minish Cap has both a small overworld and a low number of dungeons. It's a short game. What is here is great, up there with the best that 2D Zelda has to offer. The dungeons left me wanting more, but that's better than overstaying their welcome. The bosses in Minish Cap were all easy. The most memorable boss is in the Palace of the Winds, which sees you jumping between flying creatures racing through the sky. The fight uses the cloning mechanic to hit multiple eyes simultaneously. It's not difficult, but the concept and visuals are top notch. The shrinking mechanic allows for normal enemies to be scaled up and used as bosses. This is a fun gimmick, although the actual fights aren't too interesting. The bosses in Minish Cap are okay, but they aren't one of the stronger points of the game. In terms of story, Minish Cap is not that interesting. Zelda has been turned to stone. Link is tasked with gathering 4 elements to save her. This is the standard gather MacGuffins to save the princess plot we've seen time and time again. There's not much to discuss about the story. The game reminds me more of the older Zelda games, where the story is mostly there just to give the player a motivation. The writing doesn't have the depth of a game like Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask, or even Wind Waker. There are some memorable characters, especially Eslo, who's a lot sassier than your average Zelda companion. The art style takes inspiration from Wind Waker, with a touch of A Link to the Past. Enemy and NPC sprites are filled with character while all looking distinct. The locations are memorable, with some areas looking amazing visually, especially the dungeons. Being on the GBA does mean the resolution is quite low, but the fidelity feels closer to A Link to the Past than the Game Boy games. It's nice for the 2D games to finally be advancing in graphical fidelity. As with every Zelda game, the music is great. Most of the music is new, but some tracks like Hyrule Field call back to older games. The soundtrack here is one of my favourites. Tracks like Dark Hyrule Castle and Wind Ruins build a strong sense of atmosphere, while other tracks like Minish Village give more of an adventurous feel. Despite not being composed by Koji Kondo, this game's soundtrack doesn't feel out of place. Although it seems unlikely that Minish Cap will get a remaster, I'd love to see a higher fidelity version of this soundtrack. The bit-crushed audio on the GBA doesn't do the music justice. Minish Cap is one of the best 2D Zelda games so far. It may be on the short side, but what's here is great. All the key Zelda elements are done well. The dungeons are memorable, exploring the overworld feels rewarding, and puzzles are interesting. While it's not as essential as A Link to the Past or Link's Awakening, it's still a great 2D Zelda experience. Outside of the length, my only complaint would be that the side content is repetitive. It's fine for a normal playthrough, but I would not go for 100% completion. That's all for this episode. Next time I'll be covering Twilight Princess. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.